Hi and welcome everyone to our 15th episode of The Little Inside. My name is still Tobi, surprisingly. And this week we're going to have a look at the subject of being attached to views, opinions, and perceptions and so forth. So let's get started right after the intro as usual. Do you often get into fights with other people, arguments about politics, about religion? Do you often feel like you are right and others are wrong? Or do you often feel like others are right and you are wrong? It might be because you are attached to views and opinions and perceptions. It happens to the best of us. In fact, I think it happens to all of us all the time. And we get attached to our views and opinions and perceptions. So that will result in a general sense of unease, general sense of kind of feeling separated from other people, because very often we use these kind of perceptions and viewpoints that we have to see where we differ or where we come together in a group, so we are all agreeing on this one, and those others over there, they're not agreeing, they're not kind of having the same beliefs as we do, they're not walking the same path as we do. Therefore, they're separate from us and so forth. So many of the perceptions, many of the opinions and views that we're holding on so desperately, they are actually not serving us very much. They're creating more separation, more problems, more trouble all over the world. You can see people suffer because they are attached to their views and opinions and so forth. In my opinion, some views and opinions have their place. Most certainly. So, for example, it would not be that we have airplanes, that we have air conditioners and so forth if it wasn't for perceptions, if it wasn't for opinions and so forth. So obviously, there are a few things about perceptions, opinions and viewpoints that fulfill a function that is more or less useful depending on your point of view really in this world. But in general, if we get very attached to a perception, a viewpoint, we're generally becoming unable to see that another person is just as attached to their viewpoint, to their perception as we are. And that then oftenly results in kind of arguments and fights about, well, very often just stuff in our heads. You can say we're often fighting about just air bubbles in our heads. Nothing of real substance. Now people can ruin their whole dinner over a conversation about, I don't know, two famous politicians running for president in the US or something like that. So you can lose your head about this. You can fight with your family, you can lose friends over this and so forth. And it is all for the sake of kind of trying to be right and putting yourself out there and showing others your point of view and why it is correct and so forth. You go on YouTube, as you most probably are right now already, and you will see that in many videos people go into comment wars. They're fighting, and all that is because we are so attached to these views and opinions and perceptions that we have. Now, being attached to views, opinions and perceptions simply means that you're identified with a perception, that you're identified with a viewpoint. It helps, however, to see that every viewpoint you're holding, every kind of perception that you're holding, it is something that we have learned. That is something that has been culturally built up over the centuries, that we all have learned to agree upon, like when you eat, then you should kind of keep your elbows at your side. My grandmother used to say it all the time, keep your elbows in. And they were trained by their father with a broomstick they had to hold kind of behind their back, like between their arms, so they can sit properly and so forth. So there's all these kind of manners and ideas that all fulfill a certain function in our society, and therefore they cannot be dismissed. I don't want to be dismissive of perceptions or opinions or viewpoints here, but what I want to point out is that all too often viewpoints, perceptions and so forth, particularly if we're very attached to them, lead to all sorts of unpleasantness, conflict and disturbances all over the world. Those are the terrorists. They are the bad guys. And those are the good guys. Now, of course we belong to the good guys. We are the good guys. Of course I am the one that's right, and of course you must be the one that's wrong. And here are 20 reasons why you are wrong and I am right. So all that are perceptions, opinions, viewpoints that have been formed and shaped throughout our entire life, kind of like a second-hand knowledge. Things we read, things we pick up, things we learn as we go along. They form these kind of perceptions. So it's not that kind of a serious thing. If we learn to detach a little bit, we might have an easier life. Particularly easier because we are able to understand our fellow human brothers and sisters. We can see, oh, all right, I understand why they feel like that, why they are upset, and I can understand that they are holding such and such a viewpoint, and they're free to do so, honestly, right? Everyone is free to have a viewpoint and to hold their own perceptions, actually. It becomes problematic only when your perceptions lead to the downfall of a community and the suffering of other people, or the suffering of yourself. That's simple. Then it's very questionable. Is it really useful to attach to such things that lead to suffering? Of course, I think most people would agree and say, well, no, I don't want to suffer, I don't want to feel bad, I think no one really does. So why is it that we keep holding on so stubbornly to our opinions, not being able to loosen up, to let go and see, oh well, they're just opinions? The reason is we don't have any mindfulness. We cannot see, just as always, we cannot see ourselves. We cannot see that when an opinion arises, that it is just that, an opinion, right? It is nothing more, nothing less. It is a formed, shaped opinion. And if we can let go of those guys, those opinions, those perceptions, those viewpoints, we can let go of those and just simply leave them alone, not touch them, we can rest quite peacefully. We can be quite empathic. Understanding other people becomes much more easy from such a position. Because you're not inflexible anymore, you're not rigid anymore in your kind of mental constructs. That's what all that this is, right? So we have these kind of rigid mental constructs, and then we are holding on to them as if our life would depend on it. To be right. To know the answer to things and so forth. So most of our knowledge is just read, is something that's regurgitated over and over, that is constantly changing and adapting. Our scientific progress, what we thought that was true 2,000 years ago, is now totally debunked, right? And so we keep debunking again and again. So these perceptions and viewpoints also continuously change. It helps to see that, actually. It helps to see very clearly that within your own mind, perceptions and viewpoints continuously change as you get older, more mature in life, have more experience in meditation, and more experience traveling and so forth. Your ideas and opinions change all the time. So it's not really necessary to take them all that seriously so that they lead to fights and conflicts and suffering or pain. So as always, the medicine to overcome this, to let go of perceptions and views and so forth, to find some rest really for some time, maybe not always, but just sometimes during the day. It helps to become an observer to your perceptions, to actually get to know yourself a little bit. Not from the viewpoint of a perception themselves. You're not perceiving yourself in a certain way, like let's say, oh, I'm quite good at this meditation practice. I'm getting better. Maybe soon I'll get enlightened. Or, there is anger. I shouldn't be angry. Why am I angry again? I'm always angry. I'm such an angry person. Not that. That's a perception again. A perception viewpoint again. You are looking through a colored glass at yourself. If the colored glass is the color yellow, of course you will appear as a yellow person. But we're trying to simply observe all that within ourselves from a pure point of just simple awareness. Just knowing, aha, there's a perception. Or having a perception is like this. There's nothing to do about it. Just observe it. Have a look. Study it, if you will. Oh, there's a viewpoint. Having a viewpoint is like this. Notice what it does to you holding on to such a viewpoint, holding on to such a perception. If you are discussing something with someone and then this kind of very strong point comes up, this strong point of view comes up, you really want to show the other person, can you have mindfulness in this moment and actually see yourself? What kind of fire that causes mostly in ourselves? And observing that. This is a learning process. And this is what mindfulness really does for you. It helps you to learn all about yourself. It helps you to let go of these things that cause yourself and others suffering. So, episode 15 is coming to an end by now. We've been discussing perceptions and views, and particularly attaching to them, identifying with them, and the various downfalls that can bring about, that can hurt ourselves and other people if we do this too aggressively, if we have no self-knowledge, if we have no mindfulness, you can say. So this is pretty much all I think that comes to mind about this subject right now. And as always, if you still have any questions or you want to kind of further the discussion a little bit, then please write down your perception down there in the comment section below. Feel free to write me all your opinions, send me emails or whatever it is. We're all free to have our perceptions and opinions. And I think the real point is you can have those perceptions and opinions, but a real trouble becomes when they start to actually rule you. If you are ruled by your perceptions and opinions, then it often becomes troublesome. If you're mindful of them, you're quite free and flexible. Okay, so I hope that was helpful in some way and gave you some inspiration and helped you on your spiritual path. We are on every Wednesday, and I'm looking forward to see you guys next week again. Have a great week. Bye-bye.